is causing, and we remain strongly committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal.
On its own. The Federal Reserve was created in order to, one, cut back on bank failures, reduce inflation, and prevent deflation. All of those things reached historic highs never seen before under the Federal Reserve. So,
how often do you ask yourself, why is the cost of meat and eggs so high? Especially over the last 5 years, we've all noticed that inflation is real. And in fact, when my wife and I sometimes walk out of the grocery store, we'll look in our cart and we're just like, wow, we really didn't buy that much, but it sure costs a lot. So the question is, how did we get here? How did we get to a place of inflation? So let's talk about it. The federal government spends far more than it takes in, but the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank then makes up for that difference by injecting new currency into the system through the credit markets, in particular the bond market. And so when people get access to that money, you now have new money in circulation that wasn't there before, and you presumably have the same goods and services being chased by that new money. So that will necessarily drive up prices. The Federal Reserve Bank is known for doing this, especially during times of recession when people aren't spending money. But during those times, we tend to rack up a lot of national debt through budget deficits. And so what I like to call this is a hidden tax on the people. We all get taxed at a certain rate, and we know what those rates are depending on your income. But did you know that you're actually being taxed through inflation? And it's not just happenstance, it is a goal. The Federal Reserve Bank, and you can listen to the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, every time there is a meeting, he will talk about the target that the Federal Reserve has for 2% inflation every year. If we're running lower than that, then they try and manipulate the credit markets to get us back to 2%. And if we're running higher, then they manipulate the credit markets to get us back down to 2%. Well, side note, the metrics that they use are not all the metrics that are out there. And in reality, we run higher than 2% inflation. But at the very least, we're running 2%. And what that means is the value of the dollars in your bank account erode by 2% at least every year. And so that is where the hidden tax is. Imagine that over 10 years. Well, you can do the math, especially if you compound it. And so what does this do? It affects the young and the poor and those on fixed incomes and the elderly. And I will just say that according to the Bible, God hates this. In the book of Proverbs, you can read in chapter 11, it says, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord. You can go to chapter 20 and in other places of God's law where God commands us not to have unequal weights and measures. Well, what does that mean? Well, it at least means that if you tax people and they know what it is, then they can plan for it. But if you're intentionally devaluing people's money over time, that's a hidden tax. And it hurts people, especially those who live hand to mouth. They don't have the ability to invest money in tangible assets. You see, if you invest in tangible assets, then those tangible assets continue to rise in price, and that offsets for you what inflation does to the dollars in your bank account. But again, for the poor and those on fixed incomes, it hurts them. If you recall, Jesus chastised people who were falsely exchanging money and cheating other people while in the temple, and he drove them out and called them a den of thieves. So God is very serious about this. What I would just say is, number one, I appreciate that President Trump has set a course for fiscal responsibility in our nation by instituting DOGE and finding wasteful spending. But we have to do far more. In fact, I will offer a small critique which is President Trump has also been promoting the One Big Beautiful Bill that just passed the U.S. House. While it does find savings, the savings is $1.4 trillion over the next 10 years. But we're going to, according to the OMB, only take in $5.2 trillion this year, and we're going to spend $6.95 trillion this year, which means we're going to go into deficit one more time this year by $1.7 trillion. So we may have found some savings over 10 years, but we're going to outspend that savings just in this year alone. And we need to do something about it. So hopefully we'll be making more podcasts about what we think is the solution to this problem.